Hey gang, welcome to the new channel. My name is Michael and I am the para-investigator. Now the premise behind this show is pretty simple. Essentially we investigate firsthand claims of the paranormal, the supernatural, but we do so through a skeptical mindset. Now for our first investigation, we will be investigating the Arthur Findlay College. The Arthur Findlay College is a mediumship school, which in simple terms teaches its students how to talk to ghosts. Now I discovered the Arthur Findlay College a few months ago. I was just surfing on the web and I found out there's a school that teaches people how to talk to ghosts. And I thought that was really, really cool. I wanted to see what you could learn from an institution like this. I want to talk to ghosts. And so, I sent the Arthur Findlay College 80 of my hard-earned US dollars, and I enrolled in one of their classes. The only problem is the Arthur Findlay College is situated in Stansted, in the United Kingdom, which is a hop, skip, and a jump from the United States, where I live. So, unfortunately, I won't be able to go there in person and investigate the college firsthand. And this also means that a lot of the information that I give you, particularly about the history of the college and its founders and its teachers, comes from the Arthur Findlay website, with very little chance for me to fact check it anywhere else. On top of this, unfortunately, I won't be able to record the class itself, but I was given permission to give a retelling of what happened to me in my course and what I learned there, as well as give my own takes as to what I think happened in these courses. But disclaimer aside, let's get into it. The Arthur Findlay College was originally called, and is still referred to today, as Stansted Hall. The building where many of the classes take place began construction in 1871 and wasn't in construction until 1876. The property would later be sold to Arthur Findlay and his wife Gertrude in 1923. Arthur had a hand in just about everything. He was a magistrate member, a stockbroker, and a very prolific writer, mostly in regards to spiritualism. He would write such books as On the Edge of the Etheric and The Psychic Stream, which I'm going to edit in right here. There we go. As early as 1945, Arthur had begun discussing how he wanted to transfer ownership of Stansted Hall to the Spiritualist National Union to act as a mediumship school. And on April 13th, 1964, he would finally transfer all ownership of the estate to the SNU. To quote the Arthur Findlay College website, the SNU would receive various pieces or parcels of land comprising gardens, grounds, drive, lake, including island therein, and woodlands containing an area of 15.750 acres, together with the mansion house known as Stansted Hall with its outbuildings, garage, and stabling, Stansted Entrance Lodge, boathouse, and other buildings now erected or standing thereon, together with various rights-of-way. This was done to provide a permanent home for the Arthur Findlay College for the advancement of psychic science. Arthur Findlay himself would pass away later in July of that same year, and the Spiritualist National Union would continue its efforts to make a school for mediums. In the modern day, the Arthur Findlay College maintains a healthy reputation as a mediumship college, with many students referring to it as Hogwarts for mediums. A quick look through their roster of online classes shows courses like Shamanism, Creating Sacred Space in Nature, The Soul of the Rainbow, which teaches energy healing through the use of colors, and Exploring the Power Within Spirit Communication, some of which can be taken in person at the college, and some which can be taken over a Zoom call, which is where I come in. Now, I want to take a second to actually discuss the course that I participated in, as well as the teacher who was leading it. I signed up for a course called Evidential Spiritual Mediumship, hosted by Minister Matthew Smith. Now, this course, it's essentially going to be a beginner's class. It's supposed to provide you helpful tips and tricks for opening up communication so you can talk to spirits. Now, I'm not going to go in word for word and tell you what all the course description said. I'll get into what the course was actually about here in a little bit, but I do want to stop and talk about Minister Matthew Smith, because I did find some interesting things about him. According to his profile on the AFC website, he began his connection with spiritualism at the Bittern Spiritualist Church in Southampton. He would become the church president twice and hold other committee positions in the Bittern Church and the Spiritualist National Union. He would also attend the AFC as a student before becoming a teacher and would be ordained as a minister in 2008. I also want to take a second and mention something that really took me back while I was doing research for this episode. See, on his profile, on the Arthur Findlay website, where he teaches at, Minister Matthew Smith admits that he has a background in performance theater, specifically saying that he spent many years working as a professional clown. That's right, I dropped $80 fucking dollars. I'm not going to say fucking. I'm going to say fucking. It's my channel, I'm going to say fuck. That's right, I dropped $80 fucking dollars to have a literal clown teach me how to talk to ghosts. But now that we've met the founder, now that we've met the teacher, it's time for us to go to class. So our class began as a Zoom call. Now it took place at around 3 p.m. London time, which isn't all that big a deal. That's about 9 a.m. for me. Only problem is, I'm a bit of a moron. I don't know how time zones work. They do really confuse me. So I showed up about an hour early for the class. But when it actually got underway, we were all gathered in our little party group, and it's a Zoom call. It's a waiting room for a Zoom call. So you had about 30 people in the class in total. And while we're waiting for everyone, Minister Smith decided to start playing ABBA in the background. So odds are you've seen what a Zoom call looks like. We have 30 middle-aged people. I think I was like the youngest person there. They had their mics muted, nothing's going on, so it's a bunch of middle-aged people just staring blankly at a screen waiting for something exciting to happen. And then you just see my goofy ass in the bottom corner of the screen dancing along to Dancing Queen. So, I'm getting my money's worth. At least I'm having fun here. But then Minister Smith, he comes in and we get started. Now, the core of his teaching is that your imagination is your best friend. Apparently, spirits are able to communicate to us through our subconscious, our imagination, and we're not supposed to really question whatever messages come through to us. We're supposed to accept whatever comes through and relay it to the sitter, or whoever it is we're doing a reading for. Now, I gotta be honest, right off the bat, while I might not share the same spiritual beliefs as Minister Smith, I was really impressed with his methodology. From the get-go, he would always encourage us to be more mechanical in our readings. We have to give the sitter something verifiable, something we can prove, something that they can definitely look at and say, that reminds me of someone I know. And if we did get into readings that were based more off of vague notions, emotions, stuff of that nature, he would always sit us down and be like, you know what, that's great. A lot of that came through for you, but how do we prove that? And then he would encourage us to go back to whatever spirit we were trying to talk to and ask them to develop that idea a little bit more. Make it a little more concrete. Which, you know what? not the worst idea. But about 30 minutes in, we were finally paired off into groups to perform readings for each other. I was paired up with this guy, I'm going to call him Gary, and Gary, he was a bit of an older gentleman. Now the way this was set up, we would have to do 15-minute readings for each person, and Gary, he did my reading first, but I'm going to wait and talk about that a little later on in the video. First of all, I want to talk about the reading I gave for Gary. Now, to preface this, I'll be honest with you, I'm not a medium. I don't believe in mediums. I've researched cold reading techniques before in the past, but it's nothing I've ever actually put into practice. So I'll be honest with you, I was a little nervous going into this. But Minister Smith, he gave us some wise words of wisdom. He said that whenever you're starting a reading, you don't really know where to go, you're not sure of it, you simply close your eyes and you say, I'm aware of. And the spirits you're trying to talk to will finish the sentence for you. So I sat there and I went into a little trance and I said, I'm aware of, and the rest just sort of came to me. I was met with the presence of a woman, a little younger than Gary himself, with long, flowing blonde hair. I described her as wearing a white dress. She came across as very spiritual and artsy and a very go-with-the-flow type of person. And I realized that she was very, very close with my pal Gary. She mainly wanted to tell me that she was proud of Gary's success in this life, that he was doing very well for himself financially, but she was even prouder of his spiritual growth and the journey that he was currently on. But other than that, I couldn't really get much. But we still had some time on the clock, so Gary said we're going to do another test. He wanted me to reach out and try to make contact with another spirit he felt might want to try to come through. So I closed my eyes and I went in another trance, and this time I was met by an older gentleman. He was rather skinny, he had really long, scruffy hair, he had a bit of a scruffy beard, he wore glasses, and I envisioned him as wearing a bunch of like those Hawaiian button-down shirts. He came across as one of those guys that like to joke a lot. He was a real zany guy. But I also got the impression that he had served as a mentor for Gary when Gary himself was a much younger man. In fact, it also came across to me that this man was a mentor for a lot of young men. And there's one thing that did come across. This man had served as a mentor for one young man in particular who suffered through a terrible addiction. I won't say what it was here, but Gary explained to me that that young man actually was the spirit's son, at least as far as he could tell based on who I was describing. I also got the impression that this guy was a man of many hats, that he was really good with his hands, really good with tools, which will become an important point a little later on when I'm describing this. But halfway through my reading, Gary said that he feels this spirit in particular would have a message he wants to share with Gary. And he asked me if I could try and pull that out of him. So I sat, I focused, and I came to the conclusion that this man had died very, very quickly. It was very unexpected, although I couldn't quite figure out what it is. Now, being Gary's mentor, I realized that this man had a gift that he wanted to give to Gary. Something that Gary really needed at one point in his life, but it's something he had since gotten for himself. And since he had died so unexpectedly, he wasn't able to give it to Gary in person. He also told me that he had left this gift with his children. So once the sitting was over, Gary should try and reach out to them, and they would know what I was talking about. But after that, there wasn't really much else I could piece together. So Gary and I, we sat and we talked for a little bit, and he explained to me that the man that had come through was an old family friend of his that he knew while he was growing up. And the woman was actually his wife, who had passed away quite a few years ago. But he said I had gotten really good hits on both of them. So we were really happy with that result. But after we were done talking for a few minutes, we were asked to rejoin the rest of the class, and everyone sat together and we talked about what came through in our readings. And Minister Smith, I heard him say, "So, Michael." And I went, "Oh, shit." I don't know how he would have no reason to suspect me, but I thought for a brief moment that I was being called out, that he had found out, oh, I'm here to debunk all of this stuff, and I'm about to get yelled at, I'm about to get thrown out of this class. That's $80 down the drain. That's a video I can't make. But much to my surprise, that's not the case. See, without us knowing it, Minister Smith had actually sat in for the reading that I had given to Gary. And he was really, really impressed with what he heard me say. From what I could gather, I got every single thing right in the reading that I gave to Gary. There's one little discrepancy, though. At one point, I said that I got the idea that the man we were talking with, he was really, really good with tools. And I told Gary, I feel like you yourself are really good with tools, and this is the guy that you learned everything you know from. Come to find out, that wasn't the case. Gary himself, he's not a craftsman, he's not a handyman, he has no idea how to use tools. But everything else I had gotten right. To recap, I got everything right about the dead people. All the living person is where I stumbled. He was also really impressed with how quickly I relayed the information I was giving Gary. From what I understood, all of the other mediums, they were doing pretty well, but they would stumble here and there. They would get a few things wrong, they would try and draw a few things out, but I was a lot more confident with what I was telling Gary. And again, I got all of it right. And so, seeing this, Minister Smith wanted me to do a little experiment. I was going to do a reading for the whole entire class. Somewhere out there, there would be a spirit that would try to communicate through me to one of the 30 students we had in the present class. And to begin this experiment, he wanted me to focus in on a smell. Just a scent that I could perceive. So I closed my eyes and I went to my little trance and I smelled this really weird, pungent perfume. It was really gross. It was kind of winey almost, if you catch my drift, if that makes sense. And after this came through, I got this image in my mind of an older lady. She was kind of short, kind of heavy set. She had a real hawkish nose. After I got this kind of idea in my head of what she looked like, I started to smell the scent of bread cooking. And I got the idea that she was really interested in baking. And then I got some images in my head of her in the kitchen, and she's yelling at some rambunctious kids that are running around, messing up her stuff. So I got the idea that, again, yes, she likes cooking, but she also had a bit of a short temper. She had a bit of a short fuse. But that's about all I could come up with. And Minister Smith, he thanked me for doing the experiment. He asked the class if that resonated with anyone. And wouldn't you know it, my buddy Gary raised his hand. He said, yes, that reminds me of someone I know who's deceased. He didn't tell us who it was, but I had the idea that was his grandma or something like that. But there we go. Yet again, one more hit. That is 3 for 3, and they're all coming from the same person. Now, guys, I'll be upfront with you. I'm a skeptic. That's the whole point of this video. That's the whole point of this channel. And yet, from from what I've seen so far, the evidence from this class is kind of compelling. There are people getting genuine, actual hard answers, verifiable answers from these readings, and I'm one of them. It looks as though this class might do what it says on the tin. It might actually be able to teach people how to talk to ghosts. Okay, but now I know I've been saying this a lot throughout this video, but I'm going to come back and talk about what happened with mine and Gary's reading a little later on in this video. For now, I want to tell you about the two other readings we had to perform for this class, to give you a little bit of an idea of what my methodology is here. Now, after our first reading, we were paired up in groups again, and I was paired with this lady. I'm going to name her Zoe. Zoe and I bombed our readings. Oh my God, we sucked. We did not get a single thing right about each other. I started off the reading, and I told Zoe I envisioned this young lady in her 20s. Again, she had blonde hair, but she was playing with her two little daughters in the snow. It was wintertime, and they got in their car to go home, a little red Corvette, and they were driving back home, and it's wintertime, the roads are icy. She loses control of the car crashes. The children survive, but the mom passes away in the incident, and nothing. None of this resonates with her. Doesn't remind her of anyone she knows, no one she knows that's deceased. But I did what Minister Smith told me. I stuck to my guns. I said, this is the reading that's coming through to me for some odd reason. And after 15 minutes of this, my time was up. We moved on to Zoe. Zoe said she was sensing someone who was born in the early summertime, specifically a Gemini, whose grandmother lived in a haunted house, and that she was getting some name that started with a J, or some word that started with a J over and over again, and nothing. This didn't really resonate with me either. Oh, and she kept envisioning a circus or a parade, something with elephants. She saw elephants and trapeze artists and flag twirlers, and well, that didn't really make much sense to me either right off the bat. I don't even think I know anyone who's ever been to a circus, let alone anyone who's dead right now. So I wouldn't say either of us got a hit for this one. And I should say, I'm not surprised by that, because I wasn't really trying to read Zoe here. After the first reading, and while we were setting up the second one, I sat down for a second and I conjured up a story. I essentially made up these characters. I made up this event, fully, consciously made up a whole complete story that no matter who I was paired with, I would tell to them and see if it worked, and nothing came of it. After this, we joined up with the rest of the class, and we were paired off for our final group reading for this class. We essentially had to come up with a reading based off of a pet, an animal. Now, it could go one of two ways. Either a spirit would try to communicate with us, and they would begin by giving us an image of a pet of theirs, or the spirit could be the pet itself. Now, I was paired up with this lady named Grace, and Grace, she did the reading first. I let her go first. And she told me that she envisioned this little cat. He was gray, he had really long fur, and he liked to frequent this house with a front porch that he would hide underneath, and it belonged to this older lady. Now, full disclosure, my family, we did have a long-haired gray cat. His name was Henry, and he did like to travel across the street into the woods to hang out underneath the porch of this local crazy cat lady who lived up the street. So, you know what? all things considered, based on what information she gave me, she said nothing wrong. So I'll count that as a hit. I will say, I would be a little more convinced of it, though, if she described one of my family members. Because here's the thing. We're a foster family. We foster animals, and we loved Henry. All of my family members, we would always pick him up and give him a big hug, and I just feel like one of us, my mom, my dad, my brothers, they would have left a bigger impression on Henry than the crazy cat lady who lives up the street. But at the same time, while I'm a little upset that didn't come through, while I would be a lot more impressed if it did, she didn't say anything necessarily wrong. Now, after this, I had to give my reading. I envisioned a cute little wiener dog. He was a very energetic little guy, and he was constantly running around in circles, as a dog does. But I kept imagining him running around this older lady. Grace says that this reminded her of her grandmother, who did have a really energetic dog, but this is kind of where we reached a little screw up with this experiment. Grace and I, we had this little back and forth where we couldn't agree on what type of dog it was. Grace, who would get the final answer on this, assured me that it was a much larger breed of dog, but throughout all this interaction, I kept envisioning that it was a little itty-bitty wiener dog, just like I said. At this point in time, this is where I get into the thought process for my reading that I'm giving to Grace. See, I started thinking that this dog is really energetic. Her grandmother isn't really capable of taking care of this dog. And of course, it'd be really difficult for her to take care of him anyway, because she's much older. But I also rationalized that if she's taking care of the dog by herself, there's probably not someone there to help her. And so I asked Grace, your grandfather's deceased, isn't he? And she said, yes, he is. So I got that one right. That's a cold reading hit for me based off of something I could infer from what I've already learned. But after that, that's where we cut off the session. And Grace explained to me that her grandmother's dog was in fact a Doberman. So yes, a lot bigger than the dog I've been envisioning this whole entire time. But after this, we joined up with the rest of the class again, and Minister Smith, he gave his closing thoughts. He invited all of us to join his Facebook group to keep up with his own classes, some inspirational quotes that he shared with people, which I've done. I've started following him. But after this, we ended the class. And now that we've gone through all of the other things that have happened in the course, I want to go back and talk about what happened with Gary. So, in the beginning of mine and Gary's reading, he read me first. He said that he envisioned a woman with blondish brown hair who was trying to make contact with me, but he couldn't get much else as far as a physical description. And that doesn't give me a whole lot to work with either. I didn't really recognize anyone who looked like that, at least no one that was dead as far as I can tell. But to make this go a little faster, I told Gary, yes, I recognize this person. And in fact, they were my mom, who is actually still alive, by the way, but I wanted to see what he would do with this. And Gary told me that my mom said she wanted me to start taking care of myself. But she also said that I have very strong, latent, psychical gifts that if I continue owning them through courses like this, they can be used to help a lot of people. He also said that I have a really strong emotional aura around me, but that is like very far off from my own body, like it's keeping a distance. So, go off, I guess. I don't really know what to make of that. Not really all that much that I can verify, except for my mom, who wasn't actually dead. So not looking so good on Gary's part. But then we got into my reading for Gary. But first, a dramatic shift in video quality. So I was in the midst of doing the 4 hours worth of editing on this video, and I made it to this specific section, and for some god-awful reason, the audio quality out of this, what you'll come to find is actually kind of a big chunk of the video, stopped. It did not exist anymore. So I've had to come back here and do reshoots, which is good for me because I've got a lot of new things. I've got a new suit, I got a new set, I got a new hairdo. I've also opted to not use lighting that makes me look like the Great Pumpkin, so that's great. Anywho, we're going to get into my readings for Gary. Now, when I did Gary's reading, you'll recall that I made mention of this lady. She had a flowing white robe, really long blonde hair. She was a very creative, artsy type, and she was very close with Gary. Come to find out that she was his deceased wife. Right up front, I should say that the physical descriptions I've given Gary about this lady, I completely made up before I even knew who it was that I was going to be paired with. I went into this session, this reading, with a preconceived idea of what this woman would look like in my head. And it just so happened to resonate with Gary. So that is, I want to say, one absolute guess hit. But in regards to what she said to Gary, this is where I get full swing into doing my cold reading. Now, as you'll recall, I told Gary that his wife was really proud of the economic success that Gary had in this lifetime. Now, when I was in the class with Gary, we both had our video cameras on. I was able to see into the room around Gary. I could see that he was in a house with big, pretty white walls. He had really tall windows. I looked right past him and I could see that he had this big, huge yard behind him with this giant willow tree in the background. He had this giant crystalline, almost chandelier-like light fixture over his head. And just behind him in the background, I could see stairs, indicating that Gary himself would have a 2-story house. But, yes, just by simply looking at him, I was able to piece together half of my reading. Gary is a successful man, and his wife was proud of that. But then we get into the second part of she was really proud of his spiritual ventures, that he was learning to approach his spirituality. And, well, shortly before we actually began our readings, he and we did banter a little bit. We went back and forth. I explained that I was rather nervous, and Gary, he explained that he'd been taking classes like this for quite a long time. So I was able to piece together that he was really interested in expressing and searching through his spirituality. So that's the second half of the reading. That's going to be 2 cold hits for yours truly. Aside from that, there wasn't too much more. I felt confident in expressing to Gary about this lady. Nothing else that I could really cold read off of him. So we stalled for a second, and Gary said that he wanted me to talk to another spirit that comes through. You would recognize him as the older gentleman with the long scruffy hair, the beard, glasses, the Hawaiian button-down shirts that I've described. I need you to understand that I'm not joking when I say this. When I gave Gary that reading and I introduced this old family friend of his, I was just describing John Glover, the voice of the Riddler from Batman the Animated Series, who I had literally met just the day before. Like, I'll put a picture on screen. That's me in the background, directly behind John Glover and Kevin Conroy Batman, who I met just before taking this class. This is not something that I cold read off of him. This isn't some notion that was presented to me from a reading. No, I simply went into this particular reading saying, I'm going to make a ghost out of John Glover, and somehow it worked. And we hit a little hiccup with this experiment because Gary asked me if the spirit, John, had a message that he wanted to convey. And I don't like the idea of giving people false ideas or messages from their deceased loved ones. I really don't. I really hate it. And yet, I'm here to learn. I'm here to participate. So, I sat for a second and I called back and I remembered, well, Gary had mentioned that John mentored to a lot of young men, particularly John's own son. And so I pieced it together and realized John must still have living children. And we weren't supposed to ask questions, but I asked Gary, did John die unexpectedly? And Gary conveyed that he did. So I told him, go to his children. John's kids will have a gift for you. It's something that he wanted to give you during his lifetime. It's something that you've since gotten for yourself. But I'm going to mark that as one more cold reading hit for a marker that I'm going to put up in here in just a little bit. But again, after this reading was over, we would join up with the rest of the group. And this is where Minister Smith asked me to do a reading for the whole class. As you recall, I started my reading off by envisioning this really staunch perfume. And I sat there and I thought, well, of course, who has really gross perfume most of the time? Really old ladies. So I just started describing someone off the top of my head. I envisioned this older lady. She's kind of short, kind of heavy set, had a real hawkish nose. At some point I added in the idea that she liked baking, which is another thing that most old ladies like to do. And wouldn't you know it, this resonates with my pal, Gary. This is someone that he recognizes. And I need you to understand that I'm not joking when I say this. I was simply describing Heinz Doofenshmirtz's mom. You know, from Phineas and Ferb. For those of you keeping track at home, that is 1, a made-up woman, 2, the Riddler, and 3, Heinz Doofenshmirtz's mom, that I have convinced this man are actually his deceased loved ones. So, what does this mean? What can we pull away from what we've learned here at the Arthur Findlay College? For one, I do want to take a second to take a step back and address my criticisms of Minister Smith's methodology. I was praising him at the beginning of this video, but there are also some things that I didn't quite appreciate about the course. For one, he begins the course by saying that anyone can learn to be a medium. And I quite simply don't believe that. If anything, I would consider it a marketing ploy. Something to encourage people and make them think that no matter what happens in this class, that they've walked away having learned something and grown psychic abilities. On top of this, Minister Smith runs his class in a way so that things aren't necessarily completely falsifiable. Let me explain what I mean by this. So, in between one of the group sessions and one of our breaks, Minister Smith did his own reading for one of the ladies in the class named Natalie. And he explained to her that horses had something important to do with her childhood. And they really didn't. This didn't resonate with her. She had no association with horses. They didn't have anything to do with her childhood. And so Minister Smith, he did something kind of bold, at least to me. He reasoned that, well, we're dealing with a lot of people in this Zoom call. There's 30 students here. Obviously, this reading was meant for someone else. So he offered it up to the room, and he added, one, horses are important to their childhood. Water has something to do with this reading. And that they had a childhood friend who died of illness. And some way, somehow, this did get picked up and was resonated with some lady in the group. I can't remember the specific details of why she thought it was important, but I would like to point out, I just find, this is me being incredibly nitpicky, but I would say that those are some very vague descriptions that he's working with as well. And I just find it, how do I say bullshit in a polite way? I don't know, I just find it very wishy-washy that once he was proven wrong, he would backtrack and say, well, obviously this reading isn't meant for you, even though you were the person I'm trying to read for. It gives him a way to guarantee that even if he gets something wrong, in the end, it looks like he's right. I would also like to point out my own flaws in these tests. See, this experience wasn't as stringent an experiment as I would have liked it to be. I really thought that the class would be a lot more learning than actual practice, and I would have liked to have taken better notes and compare them and see what was testable in the claims that Minister Smith would be making. On top of this, I would have really preferred it if I could have done like a personal reading with Minister Smith or some other well-versed medium and try and figure out how they do their readings. But this experience did give me a chance to try out and play around with methodologies I've used in debunking other mediums. When I do sittings with mediums, sometimes I do like to plant little stray lies in the middle of them to see if the medium or spirit can pick up on them. Like in my reading with Gary, when he asked if I recognized the lady he was describing, I said, yes, that's my mom, even though my mom is very much still alive. I feel like in an instance like this, if there is a spirit, any spirit that's trying to get in contact with me, and I point out a blatant lie like that, I misidentify them, then the first thing they want to do before they say anything else to me is they want to clear up who's coming through. Maybe they want to give me a name. That would be particularly helpful. But whenever I've done that before in the past, I've never been corrected. I also will admit that I was kind of all over the place with how I addressed each individual student. For some of them, I completely made up their readings. For some of them, I did cold readings. For some of them, I actually tried to engage and actually do what Minister Smith was trying to teach me, and it ultimately comes out to some mixed results. But ultimately, I'm going to do a final roster. I'm going to edit it into the video, and I'm going to put it right here. And it's going to say the complete number, at least as far as I can tell, of how many cold readings we got wrong, how many cold readings we got right, how many solid readings we got right or wrong, and how many absolute complete guesses were correct or incorrect. But that all being said, I would really like to come back and try doing more courses at the Arthur Findlay College in the future. However, understandably, once this video comes up, I don't expect that they'll see this video right away, but if they do, I can see why they wouldn't be too happy to have me come back and do another course. But Minister Smith or any other teachers at the college, if you do see this and you think it's worth having me back, I would love to come and take as many courses as I can. And to the people who I took the course with. I would like to say that, again, even though I might not share the same spiritual beliefs as you, I had a lot of fun hanging out with you guys and spending the morning with you. Zoe, Grace, Natalie, Gary especially. Gary, he was one of the nicest, most genuinely cool people to hang out with. And he was such a sweet guy. And on top of that, if y'all ever do want to come on the show, discuss what you've experienced at the Arthur Findlay College, talk about what you got out of this course we took together, by all means, reach out to me. You can comment down below. You can reach me on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm going to put those here. But I'd love to hear your side of things as well. Also, before we sign out, I am contractually obligated to mention this. Thank you to Grace for helping me shoot this video.
Can I?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna be on YouTube.
Yeah.
What's up?
Grace Bailey, everybody. PA cameraman extraordinaire.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But to wrap up the show, again, y'all make sure to like and subscribe so that you can see more of the videos that we put out in the future. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We'll post updates and pictures and extra stuff on there as well. And keep up to date with us. For our next video, we're going to be going out to Tennessee to visit and address the Angel's Glow of Shiloh. And I guarantee you don't want to miss it. I've spent a lot of time working on it. It's going to be a fun video. But all said and done, Grace, we shot our first video.
Yeah!
Heck yeah. I'll catch you guys next time. Bye-bye.
Name that one Gerard.
Gerard.
The head Gerard, the monkey standing
Who's
on.
Gerard Way?
I have no idea. He's also best
Oh,
known
he's
as
from
the lead
My Chemical Romance.
My Chemical Romance. Yeah.
That's how I know him.
Is that any good? That band? Is that any
You
good?
never listened to My Chemical Romance?
No. Michael, I think he's about to commit.
This is going in a blooper reel. I hope you know that. Say something quick. Say something funny.
Something funny.
Oh, you're a card.
So,
hold up. How funny would it be if at one point I interchanged having the cup here and I just
this is like a cut. So it's just like a dramatic. Like you drink the glass and then you cut to the next scene.
Too much wine. I look like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme. But not the one from the Titanic. The one where he has a mustache. He's like.
The Django?
I think so, Django. Yeah, I look like the Django
I have
meme.
some of that from the monkey.
Please don't break the chair. We can't afford these chairs. Not yet, Grace. I haven't asked for the raise. Zoom in really, really close to my face. Still.
Save it bloopers. Show them how incompetent your camera person is.
Do you realize that we have 8 minutes of bloopers already?
Do it. Let's do it, bro.
Like practically a fourth of the video is blooper reel.